Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com with the greatest recordings ever. And here's one that's not going to come as any surprise to those of you who are like serious collectors and even maybe to some casual collectors. It is this one. Remember what this one is? I remember this cover like it was yesterday. It's Respighi, The Pines and Fountains of Rome, with Fritz, Reiner, and the Chicago Symphony. Now, this was recorded, oh goodness, when was it? It was like in the late 50s. It's kind of amazing, actually, and it has never been surpassed, period. It just hasn't been. It's kind of amazing. It says 1960, which has the copyright, and let's see. It doesn't say anything else. Okay, fine. Oh, boy, this is so tiny. It's unreadable. All right, 1960, 1959, 60, somewhere in there. Sonically, it is amazing. Interpretively, it's amazing. And I remember like yesterday, the day I discovered this music. This was actually the recording that I first heard of these pieces. I didn't know them at all. And it was actually kind of a personal thing, a moving thing for me. You know, my grandmother, my mother's mother, was always sick. She had a heart condition. And she passed away when she was only 58, around, I guess it was 1974, 75. 76, somewhere in there. So she was very ill, and she didn't have many opportunities to like travel and do things. And one of her big vacations was going to Rome with my grandfather, of course. And at some point, because she went to Rome, she got this. I don't know what this had to do with her going to Rome, but she told me, she was like, looked at it, she saw, well, it's about Rome. So she got this thing. Now, when she was sick, she had to move. She had to move house because she was living in a house that had stairs and she couldn't go up and down the stairs. Her heart was too weak. So we had to move her. And that was a project. And we packed everything up and we moved her to a house where everything was on one level, where she would have be under less strain. And she only lived there for a couple of years before she passed away. But, you know, one of the things I was moving was her records. She didn't have tons of them. She wasn't insane like I was. But, you know, and I was only at the time, 14, I guess, 13 or 14. And but she had a pile of records, a stack of records. And amongst the stack of records was this Pines of Rome thing that she had collected dealing with Rome. And so I'd never heard of this guy. I didn't know who or what a Respighi was. And I didn't know the music at all. And so I plonked on the Pines of Rome. And whoa! Boy, did that blow me away. I didn't even think it was classical music, to be honest, because I was just, you know, when I was 14 years old, classical music was like Brahms and Beethoven and all that. And this was someone who I'd never heard of. And the sound of the music, I mean, it did not sound like Brahms. No, not by a mile. It really didn't. And wow, it just converted me instantly to a Respighian. And I went into her room. She was in bed. And then I said to her, you know, what the hell is that? It's amazing. And she just looked at me. She said, oh, you like it? You could have it. And which was very sweet. And so I inherited this recording on LP. And it always reminded me of my grandmother, and you know, and she loved me very much, and I loved her. She was a wonderful person. And wow. So I have a sentimental attachment. But aside from having a sentimental attachment, there has never been a recording of the Pines of Rome, particularly. The Fountains is a more modest work, but of the Pines particularly, that has matched this one for virtuosity, for clarity, for sumptuousness of sound. You know, the very opening, just put on the very opening, you know, with the harps going whong, like this, you know, and the glockenspiel whipping along, and the horns and the strings whooping it up with what up and 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 up. There's no recording that comes even close to matching this one in vividness and that sort of visceral impact. And it goes to show you, by the way, that recordings are not live performances, because I've heard the piece live a zillion times, and it sounds so much better than it sounds in a live circumstance. It really does. I mean, for that moment, just the richness and vividness of that moment. It's extraordinary, and it shows what you can do to make recordings an equally valid listening experience. And then there's the march at the end, of course, with the crashing tam-tam and the transparency. It's the volume of texture is extraordinary, but also the transparency, the way you hear down through all the stuff that's going on, to all of the wonderful details that Respighi writes into his scores at high volume as well. I mean, it's just incomparable. It really is. And that's what makes this, I mean, let's not kid ourselves, one of the greatest recordings ever! Hands down. And if you haven't heard it, and you like Respighi, or if you've heard the Pines of Rome is where they keep the dogs, right? No, the Pines of Rome. You really need to hear this, and the fountains too. I mean, I keep shunting aside the fountains, but like I said, it's a much less complicated piece in terms of texture. But the Pines is just, whoa. I was lucky. Thank you, Grandma, and keep on listening, friends. Take care.